There are moments in a man's life when everything he thought he knew gets turned upside down by a single choice. This is the story of one such moment, a choice made not from courage, but from something older and simpler, the inability to walk away from suffering. I first heard this tale from an old rancher in Tucson, back when I was young enough to think I understood the world. He told it to me on his porch, Lord willing, watching the sun sink behind the Catalinas. And I've carried it with me ever since. It's a story about what happens when kindness crosses lines that hatred has drawn, about two people who had no business trusting each other, and yet did anyway. I share it now because some stories deserve to outlive the folks who lived them. The dog wouldn't stop barking. Elias Stone set down his coffee cup and pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the worn pine floor. Dust 11 years old, muzzle gone white as winter frost hadn't barked like that in months. Not since the coyote got into the chicken coop last spring. This was different. Sharper. Urgent. What's got into you, boy? The morning air hit him cold when he stepped onto the porch. October in Arizona territory meant warm days, but the nights and early mornings still carried a bite. His breath made small clouds that vanished quick as they formed. Dust stood at the edge of the yard. Hackles raised, nose pointed toward the scrubland to the east. The sage and creosote stretched out flat and endless, broken only by the dark shapes of saguaro cactus standing like sentinels against the pink-orange sky. Nothing moved out there. Nothing he could see, but dust kept barking. Elias went back inside for his Winchester, more out of habit than real concern. 3 years alone on this piece of land had taught him that most dangers announce themselves rattlesnakes with their telltale rattle, javelinas with their grunting and crashing through brush. The quiet dangers were rarer. Men, mostly, and men hadn't troubled him in a long while. He paused at the doorway, hand on the rifle stock, and did what Martha had always done before stepping into uncertain ground. Lord, guide my steps this morning. Whatever's out there, give me the wisdom to handle it right. It wasn't much of a prayer, but it steadied his hands. All right, old boy, show me. They walked together across the hard pan. The soil cracked and pale beneath their feet. Elias had come out here to find the calf that had wandered off yesterday, the spotted one with the crooked ear. But dust wasn't leading him toward the usual grazing spots. The dog cut east, then south, moving faster than his old bones usually allowed. The smell hit Elias before he saw anything. Blood. Not fresh, that copper tang had faded to something darker, older. But blood all the same. He stopped, rifle coming up to his shoulder without conscious thought. His eyes swept the terrain. Rocks, brush, a cluster of prickly pear with pads the size of dinner plates. And beyond that, half hidden in the scrub, something that wasn't landscape. Easy. Dust. Easy now. He approached slow, keeping low, watching for movement. But there was none. Whatever lay in that brush wasn't going anywhere. The first thing he saw was the hair, black as a raven's wing, spread across the red dirt like something spilled. Then the shoulder, wrapped in doeskin gone stiff with dried blood. Then the face. A woman. Apache, from her dress. Young, maybe 30, maybe less. Hard to tell with her eyes closed and her skin gone the color of ash. The blood came from her back, high on the right side. He could see the hole in her shirt where something had punched through. Gunshot. He knew the look. She'd been shot from behind. Elias knelt down, his knees popping loud in the morning quiet. He reached out, half expecting her skin to be cold, expecting to find another body for the coyotes and the buzzards. But when his fingers touched her neck, he felt it. A pulse, weak, thready, but there. Her eyes snapped open. He jerked back, nearly lost his balance. Dark eyes, almost black, stared up at him with an intensity that had nothing to do with weakness. No fear in them, no pleading, just a look that seemed to ask a question he couldn't quite understand. She didn't speak, didn't move, just looked at him. "Mercy's sakes," he whispered. The sensible thing, the safe thing, would be to walk away. He knew that. Everyone in the territory knew the tensions running high right now. The rumors of raids and reprisals, the blood feuds that had been building for years. A white man helping an Apache woman would draw attention he couldn't afford, questions he couldn't answer, maybe worse. His hands found his bandana before his mind made the choice. The red fabric was faded, sun-bleached to something closer to pink, but it was clean, and he pressed it against the wound, and she flinched but didn't cry out. "Easy," he said, not knowing if she understood. "Easy now, 10 seconds. That's how long he knelt there, looking at her face, feeling the slow pulse of her blood against his palm. 10 seconds to make a decision that would change everything. She was someone's daughter, maybe someone's wife, someone's mother. She was dying in the dirt, and he was the only one here. Martha would have known what to do. Martha always knew. She'd had a way of seeing past all the lines folks drew between themselves, lines of color, lines of creed, lines of fear. A body in need is just a body in need, she used to say. The good Lord, don't check papers before he sends help. Martha was 3 years in the ground now, but her voice was still in his head, clear as the morning she'd left him. He couldn't leave this woman. Simple as that. "This is gonna hurt," he said. "Can't be helped." He got his arms under her, one beneath her shoulders and one beneath her knees, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing less than a feed sack, less than a yearling calf. The dried blood on her clothes crackled as he shifted her against his chest. She made a sound then. Not a scream, her throat was too dry for that. More like air escaping from a bellows, rough and ragged. I know. Almost there." The walk back to the cabin felt longer than the walk out. Dust ran ahead, then circled back, ran ahead again, as if urging him to move faster. But Elias kept his pace steady. Jarring her too much might start the bleeding again, and she'd already lost more than she could afford. The sun crept higher. The shadows shortened. By the time he kicked open his cabin door and laid her on the bed where Martha used to sleep, sweat was running down his back despite the morning cool. He looked at her lying there. So still, she might have been dead already if not for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Her clothes were ruined, caked with blood and dirt. The wound needed cleaning, and quick. Elias had doctored cattle. He'd stitched up his own leg once after a bad fall, but this was different. This was a person, a stranger, someone who'd wake up in an enemy's house, surrounded by things she didn't know, if she woke up at all. He filled a pot with water and set it on the stove to boil, found the whiskey bottle, Old Crow, 3/4 full, and his Barlow knife with the bone handle. The blade went into the fire to sterilize. He'd read about that somewhere. in one of Martha's old medical books that still sat on the shelf, spine cracked from use. The cabin smelled of her still, sometimes. Coffee grounds and dried lavender, and the lye soap she'd made every spring, 3 years, and he still caught whiffs of it in the strangest moments opening a drawer, pulling back the quilt, reaching for the cast-iron pan she'd seasoned so careful over 20 years of suppers. "Just you and me," he said to the woman on the bed. "Gonna have to be enough." He cut away the ruined shirt, keeping his eyes clinical, focused on the wound rather than the person. The bullet had gone in clean, just below the shoulder blade, but it hadn't come out the other side. Still in there, somewhere in the meat and muscle. Had to come out. He bowed his head for just a moment. "Lord, steady my hands. I ain't no doctor, but she ain't got one. Help me do right by her." Then he picked up the knife. 3 days, 3 days of fever and delirium, of changing bandages and forcing water past cracked lips. 3 days of sleeping in the chair beside the bed, waking every hour to check if she was still breathing. She called out in her sleep sometime. A name, mostly Nietzsche, she said over and over, the syllables breaking apart on her dry tongue. He didn't know what it meant. A person, maybe a place, a prayer. He kept the fire going even when the days grew warm. Fever needed sweating out, that much he remembered. And when the sweat soaked through the blankets, he changed them, using Martha's quilts, because they were the softest things he had. On the morning of the 4th day, the fever broke. He knew it before he even reached the bed. The air in the cabin had changed, lost that sick, sweet smell that meant the body was fighting something it might not beat. When he put his hand on her forehead, the skin was cool. Not cold, not the cold of death, but the normal warmth of a person who might actually live. Her eyes opened. This time, there was no sudden snap of awareness. Her lids fluttered, like she was swimming up from somewhere deep. Light came into her eyes slowly, taking in the ceiling, the walls, the unfamiliar shapes of furniture that meant nothing to her. Then she saw him. He watched her tense, watched her hand move, instinctive, toward where a weapon might be, found nothing, moved instead to the bandage on her shoulder, fingers probing the edges of the cloth. "You're safe," he said. "You're in my cabin. I found you 3 days ago, out in the brush, shot." Nothing in her face suggested she understood. But she didn't try to run either. Didn't scream. Just looked at him with those dark eyes, measuring him the way a person measures a threat. He held up his hands, palms out, water, a long pause, then the barest nod. He filled a cup from the bucket by the door and brought it to her. She took it with her left hand, the right arm moved stiff, painful, and drank in small sips, never taking her eyes off his face. When the cup was empty, he set it aside. "Elias," he said, pointing at his own chest. "My name's Elias." She watched him for a long moment, deciding something. He thought whether to trust, whether to speak, whether any of this was real or just another fever dream. Then, her voice rough as sandpaper, "Ishke, Ishke." He tried to match her pronunciation, from the way her eyebrow lifted slightly. He came close enough. "That your name?" She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. He pointed to her shoulder, Bullet wound. From a gun. I took it out. You've been... He held up forefinger. 4 days. Sick. Fever. Her hand went to her shoulder again. She pressed, winced, but didn't cry out. Testing. Seeing how bad the damage was. You're going to be all right, Money said. Healing up clean. Another week, maybe 2. You'll be able to travel. Something flickered in her eyes at that. Travel. To where he didn't know. Didn't know where she'd come from. Or what she'd been doing out there in the scrub. Or who had put a bullet in her back. But he had a feeling she knew. And that whatever it wasn't finished yet. Outside. Dust barked once, then fell silent. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dust through the cabin's open window. Elias Stone sat in his chair and looked at the Apache woman in his bed. For the first time in 3 years, something stirred in his chest. Couldn't say what it was exactly, not hope, not fear, not anything with a name he recognized. But it was something. And after 3 years of nothing at all, that was enough to notice. If this story touched something in you, I'd be honored to know where you're reading from today. As the old folks used to say, a story shared is a story that lives on. She watched him through the window. Elias could feel her eyes on his back while he worked the fence post, driving it deeper into the hard pan with steady swings of the mallet. The late afternoon sun threw his shadow long across the dirt, and sweat dripped from his jaw onto the dry soil, where it disappeared instantly. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the watching. She'd been doing it for 3 days now, sitting on the porch in the chair he'd dragged out for her. Dust curled at her feet like he'd known her all his life. Those dark eyes following every move Elias made, learning him. That's what she was doing. The same way a person learns the habits of a rattlesnake before deciding whether to step around it or kill it. He reckoned he understood. In her place, he'd do the same. The mallet came down wrong, glancing off the post and nearly taking his thumb with it. He shook out his hand, the sting running up through his wrist. When he looked up, she was standing at the porch rail. Not sitting anymore. Standing, one hand braced against the weathered wood, the other pressed flat against her bandaged shoulder. She'd walked, on her own, first time since he'd carried her in. "You shouldn't be up," he called across the yard. She didn't answer, just kept standing there. Her weight shifted to her good side, watching the horizon beyond him rather than watching him. Something in her face had changed, a tightness around the mouth, a stillness that meant she was listening to something he couldn't hear. Elias turned to look. Nothing. Scrubland and sage and the distant purple smudge of mountains. A hawk circling lazy overhead. The whisper of wind through dry grass. When he turned to Bam, she had moved to the edge of the porch, her lips parted. "Naiche," she said. The same name she'd called in her fever dreams. Then, carefully, like each word cost her something, husband. Elias set down the mallet, walked toward the porch, slow, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. "Your husband," he said. "Naiche." She nodded once. Then she raised her left hand, drew it across her throat in a gesture that needed no translation. "Dead." "I'm sorry for your loss." Her eyes met his. In them, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Not grief. Not anymore. Grief had edges. worn smooth by something harder, something that looked a lot like knowing. She pointed at her wounded shoulder. Then she pointed at herself. Then she made that same gesture across her throat. Someone had tried to kill her too. The same someone. Her chin lifted slightly. Her hand moved again, this time pointing east, toward the mountains where her people made their camps. "Who did this to you?" Elias asked. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she spoke a name and spat into the dust at her feet. Goyakla. The word hung in the air between them. Elias didn't recognize it, but he recognized the hatred in how she said it. This wasn't a stranger who'd shot her. This was someone she knew. The fire crackled low in the stove, casting orange light across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the window panes in their frames and sending drafts through the gaps in the door. Elias sat at the table, a cup of coffee cooling between his hands. The smell of it mixed with wood smoke and the faint sweetness of the dried lavender Martha had hung from the rafters years ago still there. Still holding on, across from him, Ishke perched on the edge of the chair he'd pulled close to the warmth. Her good hand wrapped around a tin cup of broth. She drank slowly, watching him over the rim. 2 weeks now. 2 weeks of halting conversations built from gestures and broken words, of shared silences that grew less uncomfortable with each passing day. Her English came faster now, simple words, practical words. The vocabulary of survival. Water, food, yes, no, good, bad. And other words, harder words, kill, blood, war. Tonight, she wanted to tell him something. He could see it in the way she kept starting to speak, then stopping, the way her fingers drummed against the cup, restless. "Naichi," she said finally, "my husband, he want—" She paused, searching. Her hand moved in a flat, open gesture. No fight. Talk. With white man, Ama. She traced a line between them, back and forth. Peace. Elias nodded slow. He wanted peace. Peace. She repeated the word like she was tasting it, rolling it around to see if it fit. Yes, Nietzsche say, fighting no good. Too many die. Children die. Old ones die. He say, we talk, we find. Another pause, her brow furrowing. Way, together. The fire popped. A log shifted, sending up a spray of sparks that glowed orange before winking out. I reckon not everyone agreed, Elias said. It wasn't a question. Her jaw tightened. Goyakla. He want war. He say white man lie. Always lie. He say we fight. We win. Take back land. She shook her head, a sharp motion that made her wince from the pull on her healing shoulder. Naichi say no. Say too many guns, too many soldiers. We fight. We all die. So they disagreed. More. She set down the cup. Her hands moved now, sketching shapes in the air between them, painting pictures where words failed. Goyakla hate Naichi. Long time. Before I marry, they... She pressed her fists together, then pulled them apart. Same age, same village. Goyakla want be chief. Want people follow him. But people follow Naichi. People trust Naichi. The picture was forming now, clearer, with each word. 2 men, 1 tribe. A rivalry that had festered for years, maybe decades, until it turned to something darker than disagreement. What happened to Naichi? Ishke's hands dropped to her lap, She stared at them for a long moment, at the calluses and the scars and the wedding band. She still wore a simple thing, hammered silver that caught the firelight. When she spoke again, her voice had gone flat, distant. The voice of someone telling a story that happened to somebody else. Hunt. Naiche go hunt. Alone. Goyakla say he go other way. Find deer in the canyon. Her fingers curled into fists, knuckles going pale. Naiche not come back. We find him. 3 days later. She touched her chest, over her heart. Arrow. Here. An arrow. Goyakla say white man do it. Say soldiers find Naiche. Kill him. She looked up, and her eyes burned with something that wasn't tears. Lie. I know this. Goyakla arrow. I see them many times. I make them. Help with feathers. Special feathers. Blue. Only Goyakla use blue feathers. Elias felt the cold creep up his spine, settling between his shoulder blades like a hand pressed flat. You knew, he said quietly. You knew he killed your husband. I know. But I say nothing. Her voice cracked, just barely. Afraid. Goyakla have friends. Young men who want war, who believe him, who follow him. She swallowed hard. I am coward. You were alone. A woman alone against armed men ain't cowardice. It's sense. She shook her head. Fierce. Coward. I should speak. Should tell elders. But I afraid. So I say nothing. And Goyakla. He see I know. He watch me. Every day. He watch. Wait. The wind howled outside, and the cabin seemed to shrink around them, the walls pressing closer. Elias waited. 1 moon ago, child in village sick, bad sick, like I have, fever, shaking. She touched her shoulder. I go get medicine, plants that grow in canyon, far walk. I go alone. And he followed you. I not see, not hear. I pick plants, think about child, about medicine, about getting back before dark. She mimed the motion of gathering, her fingers plucking at invisible leaves. Then her hand jerked. Sudden. Violent. Here. She touched her back, just below the shoulder blade. Fire. I fall down. I try to get up. I see him. Goyakla. He stand over me, a gun in hand. White man gun. He shot you in the back. He think I dead. He laugh. He say, she stopped, swallowed, pushed on. He say now no one know. Now he be chief. Lead people to war. Become great warrior. Her lip curled. Disgust plain on her face. He leave. Not check. Not make sure I stop breathing. He think I dead already. But I not dead. You crawled. I crawl. Long time. Many hours. Sun come up. Sun go down. I not know where I go. Just away. Away from him. Away from the blood. Away from everything. She looked at him then. And something shifted in her face, the hardness softening just a fraction. Then dog. Your dog. He find me. Then you. The fire had burned low, the cabin growing cold at the edges. Elias realized his coffee had gone untouched, a dark skin forming on the surface. He didn't care. He's still out there, he said. Goyakla. He thinks you're dead. Yes. But when your people realize you're gone, when they can't find your body, they look. She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. They look for me, and Goyakla. He have to. She made a searching motion with her hand, then pointed at Elias. He have to find me first. Before they do. Before I can speak. The implication settled into Elias's gut, like a stone dropped in still water. Goyakla didn't know where she was, but he'd be looking, and the territory wasn't that big. A white man's cabin, a wounded Apache woman, someone would talk. Someone always talked. The trader who came through twice a month. The cowboys driving cattle to market. The soldiers on patrol. Word traveled in the territory, whether you wanted it to or not. How long, Elias asked. How long before he figures out where you went? Ishka's eyes moved to the window, to the darkness beyond the glass where the wind still moaned and the sage still rustled, and somewhere out there, a man with blue-feathered arrows was hunting for a ghost who refused to die. Not long, she said. Morning came gray and cool, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain but never delivered. Elias stood at the well, hauling up the bucket hand over hand, the rope rough against his palms. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. He didn't turn. He'd learned by now that Ishke moved when she was ready, spoke when she had something to say. Pushing only made her retreat into that watchful silence he'd come to recognize as her armor. The bucket cleared the lip of the well. He set it on the stone edge and wiped his hands on his trousers. You're up early. She came to stand beside him, her bare feet silent on the packed earth. The bandage on her shoulder showed white against the doeskin shirt she'd mended with thread from his sewing kit. Martha's sewing kit. Though he tried not to dwell on that. The needle and thread had sat untouched in that little wooden box for 3 years. Now they were being used again. Martha would have liked that, he reckoned. I hear something, Ishke said. In night? Coyote? Maybe. Maybe not. Elias looked toward the scrubland. Nothing moved out there except the wind stirring the sage. Dust didn't bark. Dust old, ears not good no more. She had a point. The dog had slept through a thunderstorm last week. Hadn't so much as twitched when a javelina rooted through the vegetable patch 2 nights ago. Loyal as the day was long, but his senses weren't what they used to be. Could be nothing, Elias said. Could be. She didn't sound convinced. He carried the bucket toward the cabin, and she walked beside him, matching his pace. 3 weeks had put color back in her cheeks, strength back in her stride. The wound had closed clean, pink new skin forming over what would become another scar among many. She could leave now if she wanted. They both knew it. She hadn't mentioned leaving inside. The stove still held warmth from last night's fire. Elias added kindling, then a split log, and the flames caught with a soft whoosh. Ishke moved to the shelf where he kept the coffee and the cornmeal, her hands finding what she needed without asking. They'd fallen into a rhythm these past days. He did the heavy work, the fencing, the cattle, the hauling and lifting that her shoulder couldn't yet manage. She did what she could cooking, mending, feeding the chickens that scratched in the dirt behind the cabin. Neither of them talked about what it meant. This morning, she made corn cakes on the griddle, the way she'd shown him her people prepared them, thinner than the ones he was used to, crisper at the edges, with a smell that reminded him of autumn morning somehow. He'd grown to prefer them to his own sorry attempts at cooking. They ate in silence, the only sounds a scrape of forks against tin plates and the pop of the fire. When they finished, Ishka gathered the dishes and carried them to the basin. Elias poured himself another cup of coffee and watched her work. "Tell me about Martha." The question came without warning. Elias's hand froze, the cup halfway to his lips. Ishke didn't turn around. She kept washing, her movements slow and deliberate. Soap suds climbing up her wrists. "You not talk about her, but she everywhere." She gestured at the cabin, the curtains with their faded flower pattern, the quilt folded at the foot of the bed, the rocking chair on the porch that nobody sat in. Her things. Her hands make these things. I feel her here. Elias set down the cup. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter, sitting wrong in his stomach. "She was my wife. I know this." Ishke dried her hands on a cloth and turned to face him. How she die? The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a crow. "Fever," he said finally. The word came out rough, like it had been stored somewhere dusty. 3 years ago, come December. The baby came early, and something went wrong. The bleeding wouldn't stop. I rode to town for the doctor. But the doc was out on another call, and by the time we got back, his throat closed around the words. Ishke waited, patient as stone. She was already gone, the baby too. A girl, never even got to name her. He stared at the table, at the grain of the wood, at the small gouge near the edge where Martha had slipped with a knife once and laughed at her own clumsiness. "I buried them on the hill, dug the graves myself. Took all day and most of the night. The ground was frozen solid, and my hands..." He looked at his palms, remembering the blisters, the blood, the cold that had seeped into his bones and never quite left. Preacher came out from town the next week, said some words, but by then it was just dirt and stones. Ishke crossed the room and sat down across from him. Her hand moved across the table, stopped just short of touching his. "Naiche laugh," she said softly. "Big laugh, like thunder rolling over the mountains. When he happy, everyone happy. Room feel bigger when he in it. When he gone..." She pressed her hand flat against the wood. "I not laugh. Long time now. I think maybe I never laugh again." Elias looked at her hand, brown against the pale pine, at the calluses on her palm, the scars on her knuckles, the silver ring that caught the gray morning light. "Reckon I know exactly what you mean." She met his eyes. Something passed between them, not words, not touch, just a recognition. Two folks who'd had the rug pulled out from under them and somehow kept getting up each morning anyway. Dust whined at the door. Elias pushed back from the table, grateful for the interruption, and went to let the dog out. The morning had brightened while they talked. The clouds were thinning, patches of blue showing through like promises. He stood on the porch and breathed deep, tasting dust and sage and the faint sweetness of the creosote after last night's brief rain. Dust trotted to the edge of the yard, sniffed at something, then sat down and stared toward the north. Elias followed the dog's gaze. The land rolled away in waves of brown and green, rising toward the distant mountains, empty as far as he could see. But something prickled at the back of his neck. That old instinct, the one that had kept him alive through 2 years of driving cattle, through Comanche territory and one bad winter alone when the snow came early and stayed late. He squinted against the brightening sky. There, on the ridge, a shape that hadn't been there yesterday, not moving, just sitting there, on horseback, maybe half a mile out, watching. Elias stepped back into the cabin. Ishke! She looked up from the basin, soap suds still clinging to her fingers. Someone's out there. Ishke moved to the window without making a sound. She stood to the side, out of direct view, and peered through the gap between the curtain and the frame. One rider, she said. Not move. Elias took down the Winchester from its pegs above the door. The weight of it felt familiar in his hands. Steadying, he checked the chamber loaded. 7 rounds, and moved to stand beside her. The figure on the ridge hadn't shifted. Man-shaped, sitting still on horseback, facing the cabin. At this distance, Elias couldn't make out features, couldn't tell much of anything except that whoever it was had no intention of hiding. Goyakla Ishke shook her head slow. Cannot tell. Too far. Would he come alone? Maybe. To look first. To make sure. Her jaw tightened. Then bring others. The rider sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only minutes. Elias's fingers cramped around the rifle stock. Sweat gathered at his temples despite the cool morning air. Then the figure moved, turned the horse, disappeared over the far side of the ridge. Ishke let out a breath. Gone? For now. Elias lowered the rifle, but didn't put it back on its pegs. He saw what he needed to see. Smoke from the chimney, horse in the corral, and someone's living here. He come back. I reckon he will. She turned from the window. Her face had gone still. That mask she wore when she was thinking hard about something she didn't want to share. I should go. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't expected them, even though maybe he should have. Go where? Away, south, maybe by Mexico. Lead them away from here. She gestured at the cabin, at the life he'd built from nothing and grief. You help me. You good man. I not bring death to your door. You think leaving will stop them if Goyakla's looking for you. He already knows you came this direction. He'll figure out you were here whether you stay or go. Then I go far. Disappear. Somewhere he not find. You wouldn't make it 10 miles. Your shoulder's still healing. You've got no horse, no supplies, no... I walk before, I crawl before, I do it again. Elias set the rifle against the wall. He crossed his arms over his chest, then uncrossed them, not sure what to do with his hands. Listen to me. I didn't pull a bullet out of your back and sit up 3 nights, watching you burn with fever, just to send you off to die in the desert. You want to leave when you're healed proper, when you've got a plan and supplies, and somewhere safe to go fine. That's your choice to make. But running off half-ready because you think you're protecting me, he shook his head. That ain't brave. That's foolish. Her eyes flashed. You not understand. Goyakla not just want me dead. He want war. He want blood. White man. Apache he not care which. He use me, hear you. Say white man kill Ishke. Say white man steal Apache woman. Make people angry. Make them fight. Then we don't give him the chance. How you tell me how? Elias didn't have an answer. He stared at the floor. At the worn boards Martha had swept 1,000 times, and tried to think. Your people, he said slowly. The ones who aren't following Goyakla. There must be elders, leaders, someone who'd listen to the truth. Nantan, old chief. He listen. He fair man. He know Naiche. Trust Naiche. She hesitated, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her shirt. But he not know I alive. He think Goyakla speak truth. Think I dead in the desert. Think maybe white man do it, like Goyakla say. Then we tell him different. How I go to camp, Goyakla kill me before I speak one word. He have friends, young men with guns and anger. They watch for me. The morning light slanted through the window, catching dust motes in the air. Elias watched them drift, tiny specks of nothing floating in golden light, and thought about Martha, about how she'd always said the Lord put people in each other's paths for a reason, even when the reason wasn't clear. He'd stopped believing that after she died, stopped believing in much of anything except the next day's work and the slow turning of seasons. But maybe, just maybe, she'd been right all along. What if you didn't go alone? Ishke's brow furrowed. What if I went with you, not to the camp? I know they'd never let me get that close, but near enough that you could get word to this Nantan. Somewhere he could come meet us, hear your side of things. You ride into Apache land with Apache woman. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. They kill you before you say one word. Maybe, maybe not. He picked up the rifle again, turned it over in his hands, feeling the smooth wood and cold metal. I've been dead for 3 years anyway. Just haven't had the sense to lie down. She stared at him. Something shifted behind her eyes. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of something that looked almost like hope. Why you do this? Why you help me? I nothing to you. Stranger, enemy, even. Your people and my people. She made a cutting motion with her hand. We not friends. We never friends. Elias thought about that. Thought about Martha in the ground and the baby without a name, and the empty years stretching out behind him like a trail through desert that led nowhere worth going. Reckon I'm tired of watching people die when I could do something about it. Reckon I'm tired of being tired. He met her eyes. And I reckon my Martha would haunt me something fierce if I let you walk out that door alone. The ghost of a smile crossed Ishke's face. Just a flicker. There and gone. Your Martha, she sounded like strong woman. She was strongest person I ever knew. He paused. Until maybe now. The wind picked up outside, rattling the window panes. Dust rose from his spot by the stove and padded over to press against Elias's leg. The old dog's warmth seeping through the worn denim. Ishke was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. If we do this, if we go, maybe we both die. Maybe. You not afraid? Scared stiff. But I've learned something about fear these past few weeks. It doesn't go away, no matter how long you wait. You just decide whether it gets to make your choices for you. She held his gaze. Then slowly, she nodded. There is place, meeting ground, in the foothills, sacred ground. Even Goyakla, not attacked there, bad medicine to spill blood on sacred earth. If Nantan come, he listen, he have to. And if he doesn't come, then we run, fast as we can. Elias almost smiled. Reckon that's as good a plan as any I've heard. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Elias checked the horses, mended a loose shoe on the roan mare, packed saddlebags with jerky and hardtack and 2 canteens of water. Ishke drew maps in the dirt, showing him the route through the canyon, past the red rocks shaped like praying hands. up into the foothills where the old meeting ground waited among the pines. By evening, the clouds had cleared and the stars came out thick and bright. They sat on the porch, watching the sky, not talking. Dust lay between them, his gray muzzle resting on his paws. Somewhere out there, Goyakla was planning, gathering men, sharpening his arrows with their blue feathers. Elias looked at Ishke's profile in the starlight, the strong line of her jaw, the curve of her cheekbone, the way her eyes reflected the distant points of light like still water. Tomorrow, everything would change. He just didn't know yet how much. Around midnight, dust lifted his head, his ears pricked forward. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Ishke sat up straight, her hand reaching for the knife she kept at her belt. What? Then Elias heard it too. Hoofbeats. Not one horse this time, many. They came with the dawn. Elias had spent the night in the chair by the window, the Winchester across his knees, watching the darkness beyond the glass. The hoofbeats had faded sometime before midnight circling. He figured, getting the lay of the land, learning the approaches, counting the exits. Now the sun crept over the eastern ridge, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. And he saw them, 50 riders, maybe more, spread across the northern horizon like a dark stain seeping over the land. They sat motionless on their horses, silhouetted against the brightening sky, and even at this distance Elias could feel the weight of their attention, pressing down on the little cabin. His mouth went dry. Ishki? She was already beside him, her breath warm against his shoulder. She'd been awake too. He'd heard her moving in the darkness, pacing, whispering words in her own language that might have been prayers. My people, she whispered. They come. All of them. Many. Warriors. Hunters. Her hand found his arm, gripped tight. Nantan there. I see his horse. Gray one, with black legs. Elias squinted. He couldn't tell one horse from another at this distance, but he trusted her eyes. Goyakla. I not see yet. Maybe behind. Maybe. She stopped. Her fingers dug deeper into his arm. There, left side, brown horse with ye white face. That's him. That's him. The riders began to move, not charging, nothing so dramatic. Just a slow, steady advance down the slope, spreading out as they came, forming a wide arc that would eventually encircle the cabin entirely. Elias's hands tightened on the rifle. 50 men, 1 gun, 7 bullets. The math wasn't hard. What do we do? He asked. Ishke pulled away from the window. Her face had gone pale beneath the brown of her skin, but her eyes were steady. You stay inside. I go out. Like, he caught himself. No, that's not happening. They not shoot me. Not at first. They want answers. Want to know why I here. Why I alive. Who helped me. She touched her shoulder, where the scar still showed pink through the thin fabric of her shirt. They see this. They ask questions. I tell them truth, and Goyakla just lets you talk after everything he's done to keep you quiet. He not expect me to be alive. He not expect me to speak. He think I weak, broken. Something hard crept into her voice, something that sounded like iron being forged. He wrong. The riders had reached the bottom of the slope. They were close enough now that Elias could make out individual faces, young men with painted cheeks and feathers in their hair, older warriors with scarred arms and wary eyes. At the center of the line, an ancient man sat astride a gray horse with black legs. His hair was white as snow, his face a map of wrinkles and weather, but he held himself straight as a lodgepole pine. Nantan, the old chief. Elias looked at Ishke. If you go out there and he doesn't believe you, if Goyakla turns them against you, then I die speaking truth. She said it simply, without drama, like she was talking about the weather. I not die hiding. I not die running. If I die standing up, looking them in the eye. She moved toward the door. Wait. Elias set down the rifle. He crossed to where she stood, her hand on the latch, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I'm going with you. No. They see white man. They think trap. Think enemy. Think trick. They see white man standing with you. No weapon in his hands. They might think something else. They might think he's got nothing to hide. Or they kill you where you stand. Then we die together. Better than watching through a window while they... He stopped, swallowed. I didn't save your life just to watch you throw it away alone. She studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made her jaw tighten, and her eyes soften at the same time. You strange man... Elias Stone. So I've been told. He bowed his head briefly, eyes closed. Lord, I don't know what's coming, but whatever it is, let me face it right. Let me face it like Martha would have wanted. Then he opened the door. The morning air hit him cold and clean, carrying the smell of sage and horse sweat and something else, something sharper, like the smell before a thunderstorm. The riders had stopped maybe 200 yards out, close enough that he could see the tension in their horses. The way the animals shifted and stamped, eager to run or fight. Elias stepped off the porch. Ishke moved beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The old chief Nantan raised one hand. The line of riders went still. A single horseman broke from the formation and rode forward. Not Nantan, younger, leaner, sitting his brown and white horse with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle. Goyakla. Elias felt Ishke stiffen beside him. Goyakla stopped his horse 20 feet away. His face was handsome in a sharp-edged way. All angles and planes, with eyes that moved constantly, taking in the cabin, the corral, the two figures standing in the yard. When those eyes landed on Ishke, something flickered in them. Surprise, maybe, or fear. He hid it quickly. Ishke, his voice carried easily in the morning quiet. We thought you dead. The whole village mourned, wept for you. And now we find you here. His gaze shifted to Elias, turned cold as creek water in January. With him, Ishke answered in Apache, her voice steady and clear. Elias couldn't understand the words, but he caught the tone accusation wrapped in ice. Goyakla's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on his horse's reins. He replied in the same language, speaking faster now, gesturing toward Elias, toward the cabin. His voice rose. Other riders shifted in their saddles, muttering to each other. Ishke cut him off with a single sharp word, silence. She turned to face the line of warriors, to face Nantan on his gray horse. And when she spoke again, it was in English, loud enough for everyone to hear, clear enough that there could be no misunderstanding. This man did not hurt me. This man saved my life. She pointed at her shoulder. Goyakla shot me, from behind, like a coward, left me to die in the dirt, the same way he killed my husband, the same way he killed Nietzsche. The muttering stopped. Every eye fixed on her. Goyakla's face twisted. She lies. The fever has damaged her mind. She is confused. The white man has poisoned her against her own people. I have the bullet. Ishke's voice cut through his protests. The bullet he put in me. White man's bullet. From white man's gun. She looked at Goyakla, and her eyes were steady as stone. Tell them. Goyakla, tell them where you got the gun. Tell them who sold it to you in Tucson. Tell them what you did to Nietzsche in the canyon. For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Goyakla's hand dropped to his belt, where a knife hung in a beaded sheath, and behind him, a young warrior raised a bow, arrow nocked, the fletching bright with blue feathers, aimed directly at Elias's chest. The arrow point caught the morning light. Black obsidian, napped to a razor edge, steady as stone despite the tension in the bowstring. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. The young warrior's eyes were fixed on him, hard eyes, angry eyes, the eyes of someone looking for a reason to let go. Wait, Nantan's voice cracked across the yard. The old chief nudged his gray horse forward, pushing through the line of riders until he stood between Goyakla and the cabin. He spoke in Apache, his tone sharp as a whip crack. The young warrior with the bow hesitated, his draw arm trembling with the strain of holding. Then slowly, reluctantly, he lowered the weapon. Goyakla's face had gone the color of ash. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. She lies, he said, switching to English. His voice had lost its smoothness, cracking at the edges like dried mud. The white man, he has done something to her, twisted her mind, made her speak against her own blood. Nantan turned to look at Ishke. His eyes were old but clear, taking in the healing wound on her shoulder, the way she stood straight despite the tremor in her hands. He asked her something in their language. Quiet, almost gentle. Ishke answered. Her voice caught once, then steadied. She spoke for a long time, her hands moving to illustrate points Elias couldn't follow. She pointed at the mountains, at her shoulder, at Goyakla, who sat rigid on his horse like a man turned to wood. When she finished, Nantan was silent. The wind picked up, stirring dust devils in the yard. One of the horses stamped and snorted. Somewhere behind the line of warriors, a hawk screamed. Then Nantan spoke again, not to Ishke, but to Goyakla. A single question, 2 or 3 words, delivered in a tone that expected an answer. Goyakla's jaw worked. I do not have to explain myself to show us. Nantan's English was accented but clear. Show us the gun. Silence. You say white man shoot her. Show us his gun. Show us. It is same gun, same bullet. Goyakla's hand moved toward his belt, then stopped. His eyes darted left, right, measuring distances, counting allies. Some of the younger warriors shifted on their horses, but none of them moved to support him. The gun is, I do not have it with me. I left it. I have it. Ishke's voice cut through his stammering. She reached into the pouch at her belt and drew out something small. Metal glinted in the sunlight. A bullet, flattened and misshapen from impact, but recognizable. From my back, she said. The white man cut it out. Kept it. She held it up so everyone could see, turning it slowly in the light. This bullet, white man's bullet, from white man's gun, She turned to face Goyakla directly. Your gun? The one you bought in Tucson from the trader with the red beard. The one you hide under the floor of your lodge. Goyakla's composure cracked. His face twisted. And for a moment, Elias saw the man beneath the mask, desperate, cornered, an animal with its leg in a trap. You cannot prove a Kirch his lodge. Ishka turned back to Nantan. You will find it. The gun, the bullets. The same bullets that match this one. Nantan raised his hand. Two warriors peeled away from the group and rode hard toward the east, toward the distant mountains where the Apache camps lay hidden in the valleys. Goyakla watched them go. His breath came faster now, visible puffs in the cool morning air. His horse sensed his agitation and began to dance sideways, tossing its head. This is you cannot, he wheeled on Ishke, his voice rising to a shout. You betray your people, you lie down with the enemy, you shame yourself, you shame Naichi's memory. You... Enough. Nantan's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of decades. The other warriors went still. The old chief walked his horse forward until he was directly in front of Goyakla. The two men stared at each other, the young schemer and the old leader, the liar and the judge. Naichi was my sister's son, Nantan said quietly. He was like my own child. When he died, I mourned for 30 days. When you told me white soldiers killed him, I believed you. I trusted you. Goyakla's face had gone gray. Nantan, did you kill him? The question hung in the air. Goyakla's mouth opened. No sound came out. Did you kill Naichi? Something broke behind Goyakla's eyes. His shoulders slumped. His chin dropped toward his chest. And then he moved, faster than Elias would have thought possible. His hand found the knife at his belt and ripped it free. He kicked his horse forward, driving straight at Ishke, the blade raised high. Elias didn't think. His body moved on instinct. 3 years of ranching reflexes taking over. He threw himself sideways, slamming into Ishke, knocking her to the ground as the horse thundered past. They hit the dirt hard. Elias's shoulder took the impact, pain exploding down his arm. Dust filled his mouth, his eyes. He heard shouting, hoofbeats, a sound that might have been animal or human screaming. He rolled, got his hands under him, pushed up and saw Goyakla on the ground. 3 warriors had pulled him from his horse. They held him face down in the red dirt, one knee planted between his shoulder blades, his arms wrenched behind his back. The knife lay in the dust a few feet away, its blade catching light. Goyakla struggled, twisted, tried to rise. One of the warriors shoved his face deeper into the earth. Red dust coated his lips. His teeth filled the grooves of his snarl. He spat and choked, but they pressed harder, grinding him into the ground like something worthless. Coward, someone spat. Elias didn't see who. Murderer, another voice, thick with disgust. Woman killer. The words came from everywhere now, from the mounted warriors, from the men holding Goyakla down, from the old men who remembered Naiche as a boy. They washed over him like stones, each one driving him deeper into the dirt, deeper into the shame of what he'd done. Nantan dismounted. His old bones moved stiffly, but his face was carved from granite. He walked to where Goyakla lay and stood over him, looking down at the man who had murdered his nephew and lied about it for a month. You killed my sister's son, he said. You shot this woman and left her to die like a dog. You lied to your people. You would have led us to war, a war built on lies. On your lies. Goyakla stopped struggling. His breath came in ragged gasps, dust puffing up with each exhale. When he spoke, his voice was muffled by the dirt pressed against his face. I did it for the people, for our land. Naichi was weak. He would have given everything away. He would have silence. Nantan turned his back. Stand him up! The warriors hauled Goyakla to his feet. He stood swaying, covered in red dust from head to toe, his fine clothes ruined, his hair matted with dirt and sweat. He looked like something dug up from the earth, something that should have stayed buried. His eyes found Ishke. In them, Elias saw something that made his stomach turn, not hatred, not anymore, just emptiness. The hollow look of a man who had finally seen himself clearly and found nothing worth looking at. Then his gaze shifted to Elias. This is not over, he said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. White man, you think you win something today? You win nothing. One of the warriors cuffed him across the mouth. Blood mixed with the dust on his lips. Take him, Nantan said. We go back to camp. The council will decide what happens to him. They bound Goyakla's wrists with rawhide cord tight enough that Elias could see the skin bunch and whiten. They lifted him onto a horse, hands rough, faces harder. No one spoke to him. No one looked at him. He had become nothing. Elias helped Ishke to her feet. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. She watched as they led Goyakla away, watched until the small group disappeared over the ridge. Nantan walked toward them. His weathered face was unreadable, but something had changed in his eyes, a softening, maybe, or the beginning of something like respect. You, he said to Elias, you save her life. Why she is nothing to you. Enemy, even. Elias thought about that, about Martha in the ground and the empty years, and the woman who had crawled through the desert with a bullet in her back. Reckon I was raised to believe a body in need is just a body in need, he said. Don't matter what color they are or where they come from. Nantan studied him for a long moment. Then he did something Elias hadn't expected. He placed his hand over his own heart. Then he reached out and placed it over Elias's. Same, he said quietly. We lose much. Still we stand. Still we try to do right. He stepped back. You come, tonight, to our camp. We talk more. Malpes, Maut. He glanced at Ishka. About what comes next. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. You trust me in your camp. Nantan almost smiled, just a flicker at the corners of his mouth. There and gone. Trust is earned, not given. He turned toward his horse. Tonight, you show us who you are. He mounted and rode toward the waiting warriors. Ishke touched Elias's arm. You understand? She asked quietly. What he is offering, I reckon I'm starting to. It is more than talk, more than words. She paused, and her eyes searching his face. He asks you to stand for me, before the council, before everyone. Elias looked at her. Stand for you. What does that mean exactly? Her eyes held something he couldn't name, fear and hope and something deeper, something that looked almost like trust. It mean, she said slowly, if I lie, you die with me. The Apache camp spread across the valley floor like a scattered constellation of firelight. Elias counted 20 lodges, maybe more. their hide coverings glowing amber from within. Smoke rose from cooking fires, carrying the smell of roasted meat and juniper, and something sweeter mesquite, maybe, or piñon pine. Children's voices echoed off the canyon walls, high and distant, mixed with the barking of dogs. He rode beside Ishke, flanked by 4 warriors who hadn't spoken a word since they'd left his cabin. The sun had set an hour ago, and the stars were coming out thick and bright overhead. More stars than he'd seen in years of sleeping under his cabin roof. His hands were steady on the reins. His heart was not. They stopped at the edge of the camp. One of the warriors dismounted and spoke to a woman standing near the closest lodge. She looked at Elias with open suspicion, her eyes hard as flint, then disappeared inside. "We wait," Ishke said quietly. Elias nodded. His throat was too dry for words. The camp fell silent around them. People emerged from their lodges, women with babies on their hips, old men with blankets draped over bony shoulders, young warriors with hard eyes and harder mouths. They formed a loose circle, watching, waiting, judging. Elias felt the weight of their stares pressing down on him. He was the enemy here, the invader, the face of every wrong that had been done to these people for generations, every broken treaty, every stolen child, every burned village. And he had come anyway. The crowd parted. Nantan emerged from the largest lodge, his white hair loose around his shoulders, his face painted with red ochre in patterns Elias didn't recognize. Behind him came the council 5 elders, men and women both, their faces grave as tombstones, and behind them, bound and guarded, came Goyakla. They had cleaned him up since the morning. His face was washed, his hair combed and tied back, his clothes straightened, but the shame was still there, written in the slump of his shoulders, the way he couldn't meet anyone's eyes, the way he flinched when the firelight touched his face. The council arranged themselves in a half-circle before the central fire. Nantan stood at the center, his back to the flames, his shadow stretching long across the packed earth. He spoke in Apache, a formal greeting, Elias guessed, from the rhythm of the words and the way people bowed their heads. Then he switched to English, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "We are here to speak truth, to hear truth, to find truth." His eyes moved from Ishke to Elias to Goyakla. "All will speak, all will be heard. Then we decide." He gestured to Ishke. She stepped forward. The firelight caught the angles of her face, the proud set of her jaw, the faint tremor in her hands that she hid by clasping them together. She spoke in Apache first, addressing her people in their own tongue. Her voice started low, uncertain, but grew stronger as she continued. Elias watched the faces of the listeners, saw surprise on some, anger on others, grief on a few. Then she switched to English, turning to include him in her words. "Naichi was my husband. He believed in peace. He believed we could live beside the white man without more blood being spilled. Some called him weak for this." Her eyes found Goyakla. "Some called him traitor." Goyakla's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "1 moon ago, Naiche went hunting. He did not come back. We found his body in the canyon 3 days later, arrow in his chest, blue feathers on the shaft." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several people looked at Goyakla. He was known for his blue-feathered arrows. Elias realized. Everyone knew. They had just refused to see. Goyakla said white soldiers did it, said they found Nietzsche alone and killed him for sport. Ishke's voice cracked. I knew this was a lie. I saw the arrow. Yeah, I helped make those arrows. I tied those blue feathers with my own hands. Only Goyakla used blue feathers. Only him. She paused. The fire crackled. But I was afraid. I said nothing. I let the lie stand. Her chin dropped for a moment, then rose again. Then I went to get medicine for a sick child. Goyakla followed me. He shot me in the back and left me to die. But I did not die. I crawled through the desert until I could not crawl any more. Then this man, she pointed at Elias. This man found me. He cut the bullet from my back. He sat with me through 3 days of fever. He gave me his bed, his food, his medicine. He saved my life. She turned to face the council directly. This man is not our enemy. This man is good. I speak the truth. I stake my life on this truth. Silence. Nantan nodded slowly, then turned to Elias. You speak. Elias stepped forward. His legs felt strange beneath him, like they belonged to someone else. Every eye in the camp was on him, now 50 pairs of eyes, maybe more, all waiting to see what kind of man he was. I'm just a rancher, he said. His voice sounded rough in his own ears, like it hadn't been used in years. I live alone. I tend my cattle, mend my fences, mind my own business. I don't look for trouble. He paused, remembering that morning in the scrub. The blood, the black hair spread across the red dirt. I found her dying. Couldn't walk away from that. My wife, the word caught in his throat. The way it always did. My wife would have done the same. She believed everyone deserves a chance to live. She believed in kindness, even when it costs something. He looked at Ishke. This woman is brave. She's honest. She could have lied to protect herself. Could have let Goyakla's story stand, but she didn't. She risked everything, her life, her place among her people, to speak the truth. He turned to face the council. I don't know your ways. I don't know your laws. But I know this: you don't stand by while someone bleeds to death in the dirt. You don't let lies poison the well. And you don't blame a whole people for the sins of one man. His voice dropped. I've got no weapons, no army, nothing but my word and my life. He spread his hands, palms out, empty. If she's lying, I'll die for it. I accept that, because I believe her, and I reckon that's worth something. The silence stretched. Then Nantan turned to Goyakla. You speak. Goyakla raised his head. The firelight threw harsh shadows across his face, deepening the hollows under his eyes, sharpening the edges of his cheekbones. He looked older than he had that morning, smaller, like something had been carved out of him and thrown away. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. I do not. He stopped. The council waited. Goyakla's eyes moved across the faces of his people, the children he'd watched grow up, the elders who'd taught him to hunt and track, the women who'd fed him when he was young and hungry. They looked back at him with expressions that ranged from pity to contempt to something worse than either: indifference. He had become nothing to them, less than nothing. His shoulders began to shake. Nietzsche was better than me. The words came out broken, barely audible. The crowd leaned forward to hear. Always better. Since we were boys, people listened to him, trusted him. followed him, his bound hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white. I worked harder, hunted longer, fought braver, and still they looked to him. Still they chose him. Over and over they chose him. He swallowed hard. I hated him for it. Hated how easy everything came to him. Hated how everyone loved him while I was invisible. A shadow. Nothing. His knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, kneeling in the dust, his head bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the earth. I told myself it was about the people, about protecting our land from the white man's lies. But it was. His voice broke. It was jealousy, weakness, smallness. I killed the best of us because I could not stand to live in his shadow anymore. He looked up, and his face was wet with tears that cut tracks through the dust on his cheeks. I am nothing. I deserve whatever you decide. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, slowly, one of the elder women rose from her seat on the council. She walked to where Goyakla knelt, her steps measured and deliberate, and stopped in front of him. Look at me. He raised his head. His eyes were red, swollen, empty. You have done great evil, she said. You have taken what cannot be returned. No punishment can make this right. No words can undo what you have done. Goyakla flinched. But you have also spoken truth, here, now. Before everyone, she paused. This does not erase your crime, but it shows us something, a small thing, a seed of the man you might have been if jealousy had not poisoned your heart. She turned to the council. Banishment. Not death. Let him carry his shame into the wilderness. Let him live with what he has done every day until his last breath. Let that be his punishment and his chance, if he can find it, to become something other than what he is. Nantan looked at the other elders, one by one. They nodded. So be it. The guards pulled Goyakla to his feet. He stood swaying, empty, looking at nothing and no one. As they led him away, he passed within arm's reach of Elias. Their eyes met. No hatred this time. No threat. Just exhaustion. And underneath it, something that might have been gratitude for being stopped. Maybe for being seen, for being forced to face what he had become. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness beyond the firelight. Nantan turned to Elias and Ishke. It is done. The council recognizes the truth. The council recognizes the debt we owe this man. He paused. You, white man, you have earned a place among us, not as one of us that cannot be given, but as friend, as ally, as someone we will not forget. He extended his hand not for a handshake, but palm down, fingers spread. Elias hesitated, then placed his own hand beneath it, supporting it. Peace, Nantan said, between your house and our people. For as long as you live and honor it, I will. The old chief almost smiled. Good. He glanced at Ishke. Now there is another matter. A matter between you and this woman. The council does not decide such things, but I think. He looked at Ishke with something like fondness. I think you have much to talk about. Elias's brow furrowed. What matter? Ishke touched his arm. Elias, she said softly, there is something I have not told you yet. They walked away from the council fire, away from the watching eyes and the murmured conversations that followed in their wake. Ishke led him toward the edge of the camp, where a small stream cut through the rocks and the sound of water covered their words. She stopped at the bank and stood looking down at the silver ribbon of moonlight on the water. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "When Nietzsche die," she said quietly, "I not tell whole truth to anyone." Elias waited. "We try for child. Long time. Many seasons. Nothing." He pressed her hand flat against her stomach. "Then 2 moons before he die. I feel sick. Different sick. Know what it mean?" The pieces fell into place slowly, like stones dropping into still water. "You were carrying his child." "Am carrying." She turned to face him. "Still?" Elias stared at her. His mind raced back through the weeks, the careful way she moved. The times she'd turned pale for no apparent reason. The foods she couldn't stomach. The way she'd held herself when she thought no one was watching. But the bullet, the fever, baby strong, like father. Her voice caught. "I not know for certain until after you save me. Then I feel movement. Small, like butterfly wings inside." She took his hand and placed it against her belly, through the doe skin. He felt nothing at first, then a flutter. Barely there, the faintest possible suggestion of life. "This is why I not tell you before. I afraid you send me away, afraid you think I trick you, use you," and pulled his hand by. "But now, after tonight, I cannot keep secret anymore. You risk your life for me. You deserve truth. All of it." Elias's throat had gone tight. He thought of Martha, of the baby who'd never drawn breath, of the empty years since. He thought of this woman who had crawled through the desert with a bullet in her back and a child in her womb, refusing to die, refusing to give up. "What do you want?" he asked. "From me? From this? What do you want?" Ishka's eyes searched his face. "I want my child to live, to grow strong, to know father's memory. Even if father gone." She paused. "I want safety. Home. Place where no one hunt us. That's all. No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "I want more. But I not know how to ask. Not know if it is right to ask." The stream gurgled over rocks. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. "Ask anyway." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed softer, more uncertain than he'd ever heard it. "When Nietzsche alive, I happy, complete. When he die, something break inside me. I think never be whole again." She touched her chest. "Then I wake up in your cabin, stranger's cabin, enemy's cabin, and you look at me like I am person. Not Apache, not enemy. Just person who need help." She stepped closer. "You lose wife, I lose husband. You alone, I alone. We both carry dead inside us, like stones we cannot put down." Her hand found his. "Maybe we not have to carry alone anymore." Elias felt something shift in his chest. Something he'd kept locked away since Martha stopped breathing, since he'd shoveled dirt over her grave with frozen hands, and sworn he'd never let himself feel that kind of loss again. I can't replace him. Nietzsche, I wouldn't try. I not ask you to." Her grip tightened. "I ask you to be you, Elias, man who find dying woman in desert and choose to save her. Man who ride into enemy camp because he believe in truth. That man scared. Good. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. Scared is smeka. Scared keep you alive. He looked at their joined hands, his weathered and rough. Hers smaller, but just as calloused. Two people who had no business standing here together, and yet here they stood. If I say yes, if we try this, it won't be easy. Your people might not understand. Mine sure won't. Since when we do easy things, he almost laughed. Almost. Fair point. The moon had risen higher, casting long shadows across the rocks. In the distance, the council fire still burned, but the crowd had dispersed. People were returning to their lodges, settling in for the night. There's something else, Elias said. Something I need to say. He let go of her hand and reached into his shirt pocket. His fingers found the small object he'd carried there since morning, the flattened bullet he'd cut from her back 3 weeks ago. I've been carrying this. Don't know why exactly. Maybe as proof, in case anyone asked. Maybe as a reminder of what happened. He held it up, and the moonlight caught its dull surface. But I think it's time to let it go. He walked to the stream's edge and knelt. The water was cold when he dipped his hand in, cold enough to ache. He opened his fingers and let the bullet fall. It made no sound as it sank. Just disappeared, one more small thing swallowed by the current and carried away. When he stood and turned back, Ishke was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. You strange man. Elias Stone. So you keep telling me. She crossed the distance between them. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, palms flat over his heart. He could feel the warmth of her through his shirt, could smell sage and wood smoke in her hair. I not know what comes next, she said. I not know if we succeed or fail, but I know this whatever happens. I not face it alone, and neither do you. He covered her hands with his own. Reckon that's enough. Reckon means I think so. I suppose, I believe. Reckon. She tested the word, rolling it around in her mouth like something she might keep. I like this word, reckon. They stood there for a long time, not speaking, not moving, just breathing together in the moonlight, while the stream sang its endless song and the stars wheeled overhead. Eventually, they walked back to the camp. Nantan had arranged for them to stay in a lodge near his own, a gesture of honor, Ishke explained. Tomorrow they would talk more about the future, about peace, about what might be built between their peoples if both sides were willing. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Elias lay on a bed of furs and listened to Ishke's breathing slow into sleep beside him. Dust had followed them from the cabin the old dog had refused to be left behind, and now lay curled at the entrance of the lodge, his gray muzzle resting on his paws. Through the smoke hole above, Elias could see a single star, bright and steady against the black velvet sky. He thought about Martha, about the life they'd planned and the life they'd lost. He thought about the empty years since, the gray succession of days that had blurred together until he'd forgotten what it felt like to want anything at all. He thought about Ishke, her courage, her grief, her stubborn refusal to die, the child growing inside her, Naichi's last gift to the world. He thought about fear and kindness, and the strange paths that led people to each other across distances that should have been impossible to cross. And somewhere in the thinking, he found himself praying, really praying, for the first time in 3 years. Lord, I don't know what you're doing. Don't know why you put us in each other's path. But if this is a second chance for her, for me, for that baby, help me not to waste it. Help me be the man Martha believed I could be. He fell asleep before the prayer finished, but he reckoned the Lord got the gist of it. When he woke, the sun was coming up, painting the lodge walls in shades of gold and rose. Ishker was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the entrance, her hands resting on her belly. She turned when she heard him stir. Good morning. Morning. His voice was rough with sleep. How long you been up? Little while, watching sun come up. She smiled a real smile, the first full one he'd seen from her. Baby move again. Strong today. He pushed himself up and crossed to sit beside her. Outside. The camp was coming to life, voices calling greetings, fires crackling to life. The smell of cooking meat drifting on the cool morning air. What happens now? He asked. Now. She took his hand and placed it on her belly again. Now we live, we build, we see what grows. Elias felt the flutter beneath his palm, that tiny, impossible movement, that promise of something new. Reckon that's enough, he said. Ishke leaned her head against his shoulder. Reckon it is. There is a certain quiet that settles in after a story like this one, a heaviness in the chest that is not quite sadness, not quite hope, something tender and unfinished that sits with you a while. Maybe you felt it too. That familiar ache of watching two people find their way toward each other through distances that seemed impossible to cross. The way grief can hollow a person out, and the way kindness, small, ordinary kindness, can start to fill that hollow again. Many of us have known what it is to carry something alone for too long, to wake each morning with the weight of what we've lost settled deep in our bones. Some of us have loved without being seen. Some of us have waited for a door to open that we thought had closed forever. It's all right if this story stays with you a little longer. It doesn't need to be wrapped up neat or understood completely. Some things are meant to rest in us, unresolved, like a song you can't quite remember but can't quite forget either. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.